Welcome to the Gottesdienst crowd, where we foster confessional integrity, liturgical preservation, and preaching that doesn't stink. We believe that the historic liturgy of the divine service is more than mere cobwebs of antiquity, but it is a true treasure of the Church, to be dusted off and brought down from her attic to be enjoyed. So let's get dusting.
Welcome back to the Gottesdienst crowd. This is Jason Braaten, your host. Today, we have back with us Dave Petersen. Welcome back, Dave.
Thank you.
We are looking at the Gospel reading for the last Sunday of the church year, Trinity 27. It is from Matthew chapter 25, verses 1 to 13. And I'll go ahead and read that in the English Standard Version. Jesus said, "Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, 'Here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him.' Then all those virgins rose up and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise answered, saying, 'Since there will not be enough for us and for you, go rather to the dealers and buy for yourselves.' And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward, the other virgins came also, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open to us.' But he answered, 'Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour.'" All right, we discussed the context of this with regard to the second to the last Sunday of the church year, Trinity 26. It's part of these parables at the end of our Lord's ministry, discussing what the end will be like or what we can expect, right?
Right.
Is there anything about that, where it's stated that this parable is explicitly focused on?
Well, I mean, this parable, like the, what's the other parable?
The sheep and the goats.
That's right. Sorry. The sheep and the goats. That's more directly on the judgment, but I think both of them really include all 4 of the last things, death, judgment, heaven, and hell. The sheep and the goats is very explicitly judgment. This is a little more explicitly heaven and hell, because they're shut out and some come in. But certainly, the death is implied here with the coming of the bridegroom and the judgment. So, I mean, I think all 4 things are in both accounts. That one's more on the judgment. I think this one's more on, in some sense, the existence of hell, actually. What seems like it sticks out to me, that language of the door being shut and the emphasis on the foolish. There's more said here about the foolish than the wise.
Yeah. Well, and doesn't that door being shut, doesn't that call to mind the flood and the ark?
Yes.
And God shutting the door?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I looked that up to just see what that said. And there is, I think I've just been so influenced by artwork that it says everything living that has breath dies, but there's no description of them crawling up the side of the ship or something. I didn't, to my shame, I was like, when I was preparing for this, I was like, does it actually say something like that? And it doesn't. So that's just from the artwork. So there, but yeah,
but it's not illegitimate artwork though either.
No, I don't think so. But I mean, here, I mean, they are scratching at the door, right? I mean, it's quite pathetic.
Yeah.
But I think there's definitely that's the first thing that comes to my mind, right? The door being shut. And that's it, right? That's the judgment. In fact, I love, that he uses the word amen, right? Truly, I say to you, I never knew you. I mean, this is a liturgical formulation. and he only says it once, but it has the sense of a vow, right?
Oh, what is that?
So,
Why is that important?
uh,
The bow sense. I mean,
because it's not reversible,
okay,
right? This is an eternal fate, and so
okay,
that's why I think the kind of, when you said if there's one thing that this sort of emphasizes, I think that's it. So it's this kind of reality of hell is really at the forefront of this parable.
yeah. Not everyone makes
that's a
it
horrible
in.
scene. Not everybody makes it in, and there's no there's no apology, there's no regret, there's no second chance. It's just, hey, I never knew you, which is the worst possible thing that could ever be said to you.
Now, what is that based on? That I did not know you. I mean, is it because they have no? Should we assumed that when they when they come knocking that they were unable to get the oil, so they couldn't, their faces could not be seen, like just within the parable itself, right? So there's no way for him to actually see them within the parable, right? There's no light. There's no light cast upon them, and so he does not recognize them. He does not know them. Are we to draw that conclusion? Like you can't get it at the end. You can't, even if you go searching from the dealers. This is not just something that you can last minute buy.
Right. Yeah, I never thought about the light thing. I mean, that's an interesting idea. You might be onto something. I mean, it does seem like a strange statement when, I mean, look, they're the virgins at your wedding. How do you not know them? But so it is a kind of a mysterious statement that obviously doesn't mean that he's not omniscient.
Yeah.
But it simply means that he doesn't know them as his children, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. You're right, of course, about the oil here is clearly faith. I think that's just indisputable. And in the allegory, right, they can't go really by faith, and it's too late. All they have, even when they try to get in, they just have the faith of the demons at this point. Mm-hmm. That is, they recognize that he is God, and that's where they want to be, but they still don't recognize him according to his mercy or his goodness. Yeah. Right? They did try to go by it, and they do try to kind of force their way in a sense.
So in terms of what the parable has in mind, is Jesus addressing the church and the world, or just the church?
I think just the church.
Okay.
Because of the virgin language, right? Yeah. These are people that outwardly appear pure, and right? They don't look like hypocrites. Hypocrites never do, right? Real hypocrites don't.
Right.
Because right, the real hypocrite is the one that looks good on the outside, who says one thing and does it, but doesn't actually believe it.
Yeah.
And that's the really damning thing, right? Better to say one thing and not do it and be exposed, right? And why didn't you do it? Because you didn't believe it. Okay, repent, right? Mm-hmm. But the most dangerous thing is this, fake faith, which is what they have. So I think the fact that they're virgins, I mean, I would go so far as to say they're baptized.
Yeah. Confirmed?
Confirmed for sure. So, right, he who believes, right, he who is baptized and believes. And so, look, baptism apart from faith, it does not get you into heaven. Good works apart from faith do not get you into heaven. I mean, so I guess that would be the other thing. Maybe that's a nicer emphasis on this parable instead of hell. There's an emphasis on faith.
Yeah. So I'm sure we'll get to the distinguishing foolish and wise, but what's the significance of the word midnight? Should that in our mind be like 12 a.m., or was that in the ancient world something else?
I do not know.
Yeah, it just dawned on me that maybe I've always thought about it as like 12 a.m., the way we think about midnight as an actual time. But I was just thinking perhaps maybe I was assuming too much by that.
Yeah, it could just mean in the middle of the night,
Yeah,
which could be.
That's the Greek, meses de noctas.
Yeah.
So middle of the night. So it could be 2 a.m. our time.
Right. If it gets dark at 9 and it gets light at 6, then what's the middle of that? I don't even know. 9, right. 2:30, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do think in terms of the allegory, I think it just means it comes. It's unexpected, right?
Yeah.
It's been delayed. It's unexpected. It's at the time when we're sleeping the most soundly.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it means. I don't know if they think in terms. I mean, the Jews, I don't think, do think in terms of, because the day begins with sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And for the Greeks, for the Romans, doesn't the day begin with sunrise?
That I'm not sure, but
Either way, I wouldn't think 12 o'clock midnight is the way they would think of the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Well, even if we say it that way, we don't think of midnight. If I say the middle of the night, I never mean 12 o'clock. I don't think.
Right. So we're not.
But I don't know.
Perhaps we need to explain that, because the English doesn't come across. When I read the English, I think of 12 o'clock a.m.
Yeah, I agree.
So
midnight.
Yeah. So, perhaps we could, when we are sound asleep, most sound asleep, that unexpected time when you're awakened from that slumber and you're like wiping the sleep out of your eyes and you're like, what was that?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what about the foolish versus the wise? The Greek word for wise here is not what I would typically expect, sophos.
Right.
So it's phronimos. Is there anything significant about that? I mean, obviously they're not cognates, but they're related words. They're sometimes used interchangeably, but when they're used together, which happens a fair bit in the Old Testament, particularly in Proverbs, it brings, I think, a different kind of meaning to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's more of a logical thinking, predicting the future, or recognizing patterns sort of word, whereas wisdom, Sophia, is a little bit more. Wisdom is a virtue that has to do with the goodness of the soul. Mm-hmm. I think we would, in a way, that you would. This has more to do with intellect, kind of straight up thinking, rather than maybe not so much thinking about what is good, but thinking about what is, the likely outcome. Right. This would be like a word to describe. I think I'm not positive of this, but this would be like what you would use to describe a general who's good at war. But the guy who has to sort of rule his household well needs Sophia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think it's so like in Aristotelian thought, the virtues are the mean between the excess and the defect. It's finding that this word is finding where that mean is, being able to distinguish between what is, what the excess and what the defect is, having that kind of wisdom, that kind of understanding or discernment, being able to distinguish between what is central to something and what is peripheral, or being able to distinguish between what is important and what is less important.
Yeah. I think in the end, it's a synonym. I mean, there's some nuance in it, but I think in the context of this parable, it's not that. I don't think it's colored that much. But that's my sense. Okay. I wouldn't. So then I wouldn't make a big fuss.
Yeah. So then, what? How should we explain what the wisdom is then? So if the word itself isn't a distinguishing mark of who the wise are as opposed to the foolish, how do we explain what that wisdom is?
Well,
does that make sense?
I would say it's not a distinguishing mark as opposed to the word Sophia. That's all I meant. I think so. I want to go to 1 Corinthians 2. The whole chapter is about wisdom. The word there Paul uses is Sophia. So, I mean, it is a different word. But, I mean, the way he speaks here, I think, applies directly. So this is where he says that I determined not to know anything among you except Jesus Christ crucified. My speech and my preaching were not persuasive words of human wisdom, Sophia. Then in verse 6, however, we speak wisdom among those who are mature, yet not the wisdom of this age, nor of the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. But we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, the hidden wisdom, which God ordained before the ages of for our glory, which none of the rulers of this age knew. For had they known, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, eye has not seen, nor ear heard, nor have entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for those who love him. But God has revealed them to us through his Spirit, for the Spirit teaches us all things. Yes, the deep things of God. Sorry, that was fast, but I'm trying not to. But so I think that is the kind of clarifying passage of what these wise virgins have, right? That they are, in fact, actually the mature, and they recognize the wisdom that's hidden from the world, and it's been revealed to them by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So the contrast, and I think this is, so in the parable itself, right, it is hugely significant that the contrast is between wisdom and foolishness, not between goodness and wickedness, right? They're all good, right? They're all virgins, but they all also fail, right? All of them fall asleep. So there is a kind of equality of good works, and even in some sense, an equality of failure, in that the wise are not better at keeping watch than the foolish. So I don't think that this is exactly, and this is maybe why I don't want to make too big of a deal of the peculiarities of the two words for wisdom. This isn't exactly advocating, an Aesop's fable, the ants and the grasshopper, right? This is the problem with the foolish virgins is not that they're lazy. Ultimately, the problem with the foolish virgins is that they despair. That is, that they have been fooled by the delay, and they're like those scrambling for the ark, right? And they've been exposed they've been exposed as fools at the end, but they thought they were being very sophisticated, right? And so I don't know, either they're just fooled by the delay to thinking that he's never come, or they are lulled into complacency and thinking, well, when he does come, we'll deal with it then, but for now we might as well enjoy the pleasures of the flesh. Or even, I think, there could be some bitterness in them, that, they've been insulted, that they've been made to wait like this and to endure this sort of indignity. And maybe even they're kind of like, they're not going to jump when Jesus comes and says, jump, like they're going to teach them a lesson, sort of like our members that, say they're not going to come to church because, the pastor's a jerk. So, I'll show God, I'll go to hell. That'll teach them. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, but whatever it is, whatever has driven them to this point, ultimately, the problem isn't simply that they fall asleep, because the others do too. The problem is they don't believe that he's coming, right? They've given up hope.
Yeah. So in Colossians 3, 1 and 2, if then you have been raised with Christ, that's agero, seek the things that are above where Christ is, seated at the right hand. Set your minds on, and that's the verbal form of phronimos, phroneo, seated at the right hand. Set your minds on things that are above, not on the things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. So it seems to go right along with what you were saying, that there's not a huge distinction between Sophia and the phronimos or these kinds of wisdom, but that the object is the key here. That's what I take you to say, right? What you are thinking about, what you are oriented toward, that if your minds are set on the right things, you are wise. either
Right.
Sophia or Phronimos.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Well, I mean, and so the other place besides the ark being shut, the other place to go, I think, is Romans chapter 4. The man of faith is Abraham, and you have this beautiful phrase. I'm trying to find it now. It's the I want to where I thought it was 17. Hope against hope. Oh, 18 it says. Let's see here. So it started in 17, right? I have made you a father of many nations in the presence of him whom he believed, God, who gives life to the dead and calls those things which do not exist as though they did, who, contrary to hope, in hope believed, so that he became the father of many nations according to what was spoken, right? And this goes on about this, about, right, his believing against reason, in a sense, that the deadness of Sarah's womb would not keep her from conceiving. He does not waver at the promise of God through lack of faith, but rather he has faith, gives glory to God. Verse 21, being fully convinced that what God had promised he was able to perform, and therefore it was accounted to him for righteousness. So that's the kind of wisdom, right? That is faith, that is going to sort of hope against hope. And wait on God, even though perhaps all of the evidence and experience seems to be against it.
Okay.
That's what these 5 virgins have. They're like Abraham, and they're hoping against hope, in a sense.
So it's confessing that the Lord opens and closes the womb in Abraham's case, not anything earthly.
Right.
Yeah. And then,
and that is and just even whatever he says is good, right? So I mean, you can go to chapter 22 in Genesis, right, and the whole near sacrifice of Isaac, right? Abraham just goes, God said this, so it's good, and the Lord will provide. And I don't know, but I'm not smart enough to. I mean, this is the wisdom that's not smart enough to figure this out on my own, but will submit to the word, which is, of course, total foolishness to the world. So back to 1 Corinthians, right, in chapter 1, that, right, the foolish things of the world confound the wise things of this world.
Mm-hmm. Did you happen to look into at all the word drowsy?
No, I have before. Yeah, I mean, it seems redundant, right? Is that your point?
Yeah. But then that makes me wonder: is this important? I mean, is it being like, is it becoming complacent, becoming lulled by the noise around us and the activity around us, that we become drowsy to the things of God, that we begin to ignore them, that they begin to fade into the background or become part of the scenery. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I didn't do any exegetical work on this, but I did have an idea that just like you're saying, that so before they slept, they became sleepy, right? So, or what'd you say, drowsy, right? So here's the thing: is that should have been the warning to stand up, right, or to take action. And I wonder if that's not the right. Well, the bridegroom was delayed, right? They felt themselves slipping, and they caved into it, right? They weren't knocked unconscious, by somebody sneaking up on them and hitting them in the head. They knew this was happening, and they allowed it to happen, which I think is what you're saying. I'm not sure. This could be an idiomatic expression. I don't know. It does seem unnecessary.
Yeah.
It seems repetitious.
Well, the BDAG indicates that it's also that kind of drowsiness comes from just being idle. So kind of like Newton's law of inertia put to human beings in their work. Those that are at work tend to stay at work, and those who are at rest tend to stay at rest. That there's a cost to not actively seeking the things that are above.
Yeah. Well, so that's one of the kind of hints at this. this idea of rest, right? So peace and rest are future realities that we've been promised. They're not for now, and they try to take it early. So they're supposed to be vigilant and be watching for the bridegroom, and they'll sleep when they get there, but so there is something to them sort of taking a rest inappropriately.
Yeah.
Right. And not that rest itself is evil, of course. We are created for rest, but they're resting at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And to sort of insist on that is, again, that's the foolishness.
Yeah. Well, it's their job, right? Their duty
Right.
as the attendants is to watch for the bridegroom when they come. When he comes to announce his coming, and just as the watchers are to stand on the wall and watch, if they fall asleep, their punishment is death.
Right.
So there is a rebuke there, isn't there, for all of them?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there is a foolishness in the wise, right? That they take a big risk in falling asleep. So again, right? If we're talking about what is true wisdom, like you were saying, to recognize what's right or what's good or what's important, to be mature, to orderly thought, foresight, and also sobriety, right? To not be ruled by the passions in a way that is, inordinate and inappropriate and leads to illogical reality. And they give in to their flesh by falling asleep.
Yeah. So is this akin to what C.S. Lewis was on about when he talked about, men without chests, that, the chest in the ancient world was the place of just sentiments, of rightly ordered desires, where the mind and the emotions come together and are correctly oriented, that they gave into that. They were not sober in that regard.
Right. They were caught up in their own, they were caught up in the demands of their flesh that was not reasonable, right?
Yeah.
Acting as though they couldn't stay awake, and of course, the mind does give up way before the body does.
Yeah.
And they
It
could have
sure
stayed
does.
awake. Yeah. I've got personal experience with it. Yeah. I think, what was I going to say? What did you,
What about the C.S.
something
Lewis
about Lewis.
thing?
Oh yeah. So there is this kind of funny thing where I think, why isn't this parable, a military parable? Because you already brought it up, but this idea of, if you're standing guard and you don't watch, that seems like that's a more pointed and important duty than a bridesmaid, basically. Right.
Yeah.
And they fall asleep. It's the only people that kind of miss out are them. The city's not destroyed or whatever. But I think a couple of reasons that this parable is given this way, is the joy of it, right? That he is a bridegroom. He's not coming to conquer a city, and his purpose isn't to destroy. And the only people in some sense that get hurt are the foolish themselves. But so I think there is this emotion that part of what should have been keeping them awake is actually their joy. So it's not just about cleverness, sort of recognizing what's the best strategy and, what are the consequences if I fall asleep, but an actual eagerness and a joy to be there, to see him at the first second possible and to greet him. Right?
So is this akin to like kids on Christmas? Or
yeah,
on
that's
Christmas
exactly what I was
Eve?
going to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I think that is the appropriate eager expectation of Christianity. And that's why wisdom is more than just smarts or cleverness, right?
Yeah.
It's the whole thing ordered and fit together. So, and that's why the bridegroom, that's why the wedding, I think that's, why it's not a guard on protecting a city.
And yet the command that he gives is stay awake, watch.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And the problem is they don't because they fall. The delay is a scandal. And it's a scandal for us to this day, right? That we have to endure the scorn of the world for from their point of view, foolishly believing in this stuff and clinging to the word of God when it seems so unreasonable. In fact, I was going to bring up, what passage is it?
So do you bring in
forgot.
Hebrews there? For the joy set before him, he endured the cross and scorned its shame. In other words, that if we appropriated rightly the truths of what God in Christ Jesus has done, we would also joyfully watch and stay awake against all kinds of temptations and rebukes from the world. But there's a part of us that like, Adam and Eve in the garden believed the lies of the devil that said that God is holding out on us.
Right. I mean, I think that's exactly right. We should, if we saw this thing reasonably, right, then we would never sin. I mean, sin is always unreasonable. Because it never. First of all, of course, it's contrary to God's word, but it's also never good for us, and it never satisfies. Yeah. Right? It never actually promotes our own self-interest.
Yeah, because it kills.
Right. It's a lie. The devil's a liar. But so anyway, there is the reality, though, that for the fallen flesh, or for even for the concrete man, for all of us, that the delay is a scandal. And the world holds us in scorn because they're saying, like Epicurus, right? If your God isn't worthy of the name, because look how he treats you. Right? Why are you suffering this way? If he loves you, why doesn't he do something about it? Either he doesn't really love you or he doesn't have the power. Either way, he's not worthy of being called God. So, this is the kind of thing we're enduring all the time. And, it's usually not as sophisticated as Epicurus. It usually comes in other ways. But, so it is a scandal, and there is a temptation to go along with it or to, sin, to give in to despair. In the epistle assigned is 1 Thessalonians, and it does use this language of, the day of the Lord coming as a thief in the night. So I think one of the other things that's important in this is that even though we all intellectually are aware that death is coming, or the second coming is coming, and we're going to have to face Judgment Day, it's still a surprise. And so there is this, right, this thief in the night, it is a kind of surprise because we don't know the time or the hour. And we've also never experienced it before, and we weren't created to experience it. It is an unnatural reality that is the consequence of sin. It's not what we were meant for. So they're all caught by surprise by it, right? That's part of the warning of this parable is you're going to be surprised, so don't be surprised in your surprise, right?
That's an interesting thing because, we can use the word surprise either with a negative or a positive connotation.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And right. So the bridegroom's coming is death, right? In a set for the 10 of them, but it's either positive or negative depending on which side of the door you're on. And so it really, the bridegroom comes, he doesn't change. It's really your response or your reaction in a sense, whether or not you have faith or not, that's going to be the determining factor. If this is a joyous thing or a disastrous justice.
Yeah. So how do we preach this? Are we trying to give them both of those sides of that kind of surprise, or are we trying to lead them kind of like the way, a leading question would lead a witness to one side or the other?
I think it depends on your thesis, what you decide your intent is. There's a place for rebuke, to correct the kind of common errors in our society and culture that we sometimes unwittingly take on without realizing it.
Yeah. So what would those be, I guess?
I think the reality of hell, because I think the world is basically universalist, more or less, right? I mean, maybe some really bad people go to hell, but I mean, the general idea that, right, everybody goes to heaven. I think I've probably said this on here before, but this old saw of the Lutheran preacher that they like funerals because at funerals, the law is right there. Yeah. And I find that to be completely false. It's not my experience, because when I do funerals, everybody's convinced. They never had a doubt that the deceased is in heaven. There's no worry in them of that. They're sure everybody they know is going to heaven. So I think that's real. We see this with, it's really hard to believe that one of your own children may not go to heaven. Yeah. Even if he renounces the faith, because you love him and you know he's good. I mean, so the reality of this, there's a rebuke there that I think could be issued and is appropriate. So the reality of hell, anti-universalism, the fact that what you believe matters. Yeah. Because again, right, they don't get in, and it's not like everything they believe is wrong. They're virgins, right? They're there. Right. They're there with lamps. I mean, they've almost got it right, and yet it's not good enough. And it's right. They are unbelievers. They don't believe God is gracious. They don't expect that He's come in mercy. Mm-hmm. They try to demand to go in. So doctrine matters. Content matters. What you actually believe about the gospel does matter.
Yeah, they're not in the light.
They're not in the light. Yeah. So I think those things could be, if that's your intent, then I think, the surprise is mostly the warning that that's going to be negative. And that's the epistle, right? Comes like a thief in the night, and be ready for that. If you want to console, if that's your intent, I think the big consoling point in this is that the 5 wise virgins fell asleep, but there was a cry. Right. So, I mean, there didn't need to be a cry. He could have walked right by them, left them all sleeping there. Right. He warns them. He wakes them up. And, you could definitely understand your sermon as being the cry. By the way, yeah, the hymn does mix the thing. The hymn does change it to the watchmen on the city wall are the ones that cry out. But anyway, I'd love to watch what a marvelous hymn. But yeah, I think, look, this is the wake up call there. Thank God you do have a chance. It's not too late for you. This cry might sound harsh because it's exposing the reality, but this is given in mercy.
Yeah. So if we focus on surprise, both the positive and the negative, do we have anything like that left in our culture where we are just surprised? Like, I did not see that coming. I mean, besides maybe the 2016 election for most of the nation, except for a select few, right? What kind of surprises are there left? Would you have to go back to childhood?
You might have to. I mean, there probably are. I think, a lot of, I think we dismiss things because we're not mindful. We're not living in the present. I just had a little scene here a few days ago. I missed the bottom step in one of the stairwells at church a few days ago. I had a coffee cup in my hand, but no coffee in it. And I fell flat on my face. And I didn't get hurt at all.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It was great. I didn't get hurt at all. And I mean, I could have, of course, I've done similar things and gotten hurt really bad, or at least not, permanently, but I mean, pain wise, and something that lasted for, a week or more. And, in the moment I was surprised, and I'm thankful for it. But, there is a certain sense in which that just kind of passes so quickly. Yeah. I wonder if there aren't more of those things happening that should surprise us, but we're so callous and so kind of focused on our own that we don't recognize them.
No, that's a good point.
Traffic things. I don't.
Yeah. you have those things, but then also in the negative, I'm always surprised by how I can sleep and wake up hurting. Like, I've got, my neck is just really, really stiff and sore. And like, what'd you do? I just went to bed.
Slept. I thought you were going to say that. I'm always surprised when I accidentally, which I try to never do, but sometimes I forget and I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror getting out of the shower. And I think, who is that fat guy? What happened? Because in my mind's eye, I look like I looked when I was 20.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
I don't reply. I mean, I just noticed this a few days ago. I had a dream. And it was a weird dream. But anyway, I thought about it later. I thought, in my dream, I was 20. When I dream about myself, I don't dream about myself in my current state. I still think I'm something I'm not. That's kind of I don't know. Is that a surprise? That's just the consequence of my delusion. Maybe that's, but yeah, I don't know. So I do think, in terms of, I don't know if this might be hard to preach about or talk about, but I do think that people are incredibly surprised by grief. I have witnessed this so many times. Where a person will come in, a man who lost his wife a year ago, deeply hurting still, of course, and will come in and talk to me, and he'll say, I should write a book. I've heard that phrase from people in grief very frequently. And what do you mean? And it's like, well, he is like, he thinks nobody else really knows about, not at an intellectual level, but at an emotional level, he's like, nobody else knows about this. Nobody else has ever been quite through this and realizes how terrible it is. Or if they do know, it's only the people that are in kind of my exact situation. Yeah. And the reason for that, for him feeling like that, even he wouldn't say it that way. That would be, but he feels like that because he's so shocked at how much he hurts and for how long he hurts, and there's no end in sight. And he never thought he could hurt like that. He never had pain like that. So it's like this surprising thing of how actually horrific grief is. And so it's more painful, and it lasts a lot longer than people are prepared for, in a sense, right? And I think death itself is always surprising to us. Not only our own deaths, but the deaths of our loved ones. I've had even members, not in the same way, but even members who have lost pets. It doesn't last. That's the big difference. That's the biggest difference, I think. But they can't believe how crushed they are. And they're often very embarrassed by it, right? They'll come in and they'll say, Pastor, I know it's just a dog, but I just can't get over it. I just feel horrible. And it's just like, I know this isn't the appropriate response to the loss of a dog, but it's the response that I'm having. And what'll happen though, that'll be within a few days of the death of the dog. That doesn't really last. Also, you get a new dog. Dogs are totally replaceable, completely, right? But anyway, my point is there is a kind of surprise at death and at grief and at how much worse it is than in a sense we could have thought.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that has a place here, or if, the problem is it's going to be hard. I don't know. It would take too long to talk about, and you'd have to have so many caveats and explanations. I think you'd get off the point of this parable. There's a time to talk about it, but I don't know when it is.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out, like, so if you had a theme of the surprise of the end, and you could discuss the negative connotations with that surprise, and then the positive, what are the things that are immediately graspable by the hearers that you could say, see, you recognize this. That's what I was trying to get at. Like,
yeah. Right,
Or
like the Santa Claus thing or whatever. Remember how
yeah,
that's what you mean, right? The something that would sort of be r- relatively universal, right? Most everybody has sort of had this experience as a child where, right, you
yeah.
were given a gift or a grandparent came to visit or something, or and it was this wonderful surprise. Yeah, I don't know because this isn't. It shouldn't. It's a surprise. It's surprising, but it's not exactly a surprise. I mean,
Hmm.
we do know it's coming, right? They're surprised by it, and that's inevitable in some sense, but it's not a surprise.
So I mean, so is
So
this like having children? So it's expected, but when they come is unexpected.
yeah, there you go. Or also, it's not quite what It's not like you knew, but you didn't. I mean, well, I mean, right? You thought you knew what it was going to be to have a child,
Yeah.
right? And you thought you knew how to discipline and do different things when you
Hmm.
didn't have them. Yeah, so maybe that's the best parallel, right? There, you didn't know, you weren't really in control of when the
Hmm.
child was to be born, um, and you didn't really know what this would do to you. You didn't know
Hmm.
how you would change, and I mean, it is in some ways. I mean, there are kind of negative aspects to it, uh, but nobody would, right? But no Christian would turn his back on it, right?
Right. Yeah. I
I
mean,
mean,
there are hardships and
yes,
difficulties.
yeah,
But even those, hardships and difficulties, you always say, the Marine in boot camp always looks
right,
back on it fondly. Um, I mean, I think that's kind of also how it works. It's there are jokes about how long I was in labor, or there were difficult times, but when you think, unless your relationship with them ends horribly, uh, you typically look back at the good things. Those are the things that stick out.
yeah. Even I think even if the relationship ends horribly,
Okay.
um, I think even then, you're never going to say, "I wish he would have never been born,"
Right.
right? Or I'd been better off without him, even
Hmm.
though even though it could be absolutely horrific. It may not always be like a Marine looking back at boot camp. It might sometimes be like a prisoner of war looking back at being a prisoner. Uh, but at the same time, not with a prisoner of war, but with a child, even when it ends horrifically, you'll still go, well, that's a child. He
Hmm.
was baptized. Um, I still love him, and I wouldn't be the person I am if I didn't love him, right?
Yeah.
Even if he doesn't love me.
Hmm.
I'm still his father, and I'm still committed to him, and I still pray for him I mean, so even if it ends horribly, or
Hmm.
even God forbid the child, is to die in a horrific death with, in the
Yeah.
midst of renouncing the faith kind of thing. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine, even in that situation, not seeing the child as a gift, a
Yeah.
creation of God that you were given stewardship over, that made you who you are,
Hmm.
even even if he hurt you at the deepest level.
Yeah. I mean, is there a sense in this, in the surprise aspect that goes along with the the foolish and the wise, that how sometimes we will uh, try to keep us from getting excited about things because we don't want to be disappointed?
Yeah,
Is there a sense
yeah.
going on here that
Mm.
these sorts of things are like is causing our drowsiness, that we have that lack of trust that it's going to be everything that God has promised it to be, that we are holding back our full, like being fully in, like going all in on it because we don't want to be disappointed.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, that's always sin. I mean, sin
Yeah.
always is thinking what God's promised won't be good enough or isn't worth waiting for. I think that's Mary Magdalene's sin in the garden on Easter morning. I think she's guarding her heart, trying to protect herself from being hurt again, which
Mm.
is a complete lack of trust, right? She thinks God's going to hurt her. which is, that's Adam and Eve as well in their garden.
Yeah. So we are protecting ourselves against the wrong things.
Yeah. We're protecting ourselves from the one who loves us, as though he doesn't really love us, or we can't trust him to love us. Yeah. And, I mean, sleep is a form of escape.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's why we go under anesthesia, because we want to escape that. But also, I mean, I think, this is why we drink, or, all the sorts of ways that we try to escape thinking about or facing the reality or our duties. So, and sleep is a big one. I mean, it's the people that sleep in on Sunday morning, I mean, that's their only day to sleep in. And, I mean, certainly Jesus wouldn't ask them to not sleep in on their only day to sleep in.
I know.
They can't.
Well,
their bosses would.
Night.
Yeah, well, their bosses wouldn't let them sleep in, but surely Jesus would, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I mean, sleep is an interesting. It's an interesting vice, and it's of course it's a gift as well, and. Yeah. So I mean, it's a, and then there's all this, right? Our own robbing ourselves of sleep through anxiety or lack of health, all those things.
It seems to me that the same people who, will say, this is my day to sleep in, are the same people that say, I'll sleep when I'm dead.
Yeah.
When they're burning the candle at both ends and not attending to other duties.
Well, they're burning the candle at every end except for the pious end, right? I mean, that's where they'll make up time. So,
So who are the dealers in this sense? Is this just the office of the ministry? Is this the church? Is that our Lord is pointing us that there are places to go to get to this stuff? And you need to go there.
Maybe. The thing is that those dealers aren't helpful. I mean, I get it, and I'm not unwilling to say the dealers are the office of the ministry, the church, word and sacrament, whatever you want it to be, in a way that which by which God creates justifying faith, but they're no good at this point. So I'm kind of hesitant to put too much emphasis on that, because the other thing, that sort of one other detail, I had that Sellers written down. Also, we touched, the cry is heard, right? The bridegroom's not seen. He's only seen by the wise who have oil when they go in, right? The foolish never see him. And the wise, I don't think, see him either. I mean, they hear, and they believe that he's coming, and so they're looking for him. But so there might be something. There's definitely an opportunity to preach once again here on justification by faith, on the character of faith, the necessity of faith. That's that would be a good doctrinal topic as well.
Yeah. Is there anything on your list that we didn't quite get to?
I think that was the last thing. I just jumped you to the last of my list.
Is there just one last question then? Often after this reading in Bible class, I'll get questions from members about why the wise were so mean to the foolish and not sharing. Wouldn't it be better for them to share some of their oil? That kind of thing. So how should we understand their reply? There's not enough.
I mean, I think this is the old, you can't believe for somebody else.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, I think this is just simply, it's not that they're being selfish or refusing to share. They're being asked for something that they don't have the ability to give away. Let's imagine that you were woke up and you were, asked to, recite the small catechism. And then, the foolish virgin says, "Oh, teach me the catechism." Well, I'd love to, but there's no time. I mean, this is what they're asking for it's not that the wise are refusing to do it. It's that what they're being asked can't be done.
Yeah, it's unreasonable, and that's why they're foolish.
Yeah. And they didn't foresee this, or if they did foresee it, they just didn't think it really mattered. There'd be some way or some loophole. And, they're looking for someone else to do what they should have done. They're acting in a selfish way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's an allegory I've heard, that's my response is usually, look, this is an allegory. It's not a historical account. Mm-hmm. So we're not really talking about oil that can be poured from one vessel to another.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. All right. Any final thoughts here?
Of course not.
Okay. Well, thanks for your time, Dave. And
all right.
Looking forward to chatting with you about Advent 1.
All right. Me too.
All right. Take care.